everyone, and welcome back to The Question, where you have the questions and I have the answers. And today we're going to be diving into the latest international issue, and that is that the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan as of yesterday after the US completely withdraws all troops for the first time in over 20 years. We're going to be looking at the history behind the conflict in Afghanistan, our role in it, and what this could possibly mean, and our reaction to it. I like talking about how the US citizens react to what our government does and what international issues are, because usually there's a very large disconnect. Anyway, before we get started, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you're new. I try to upload at least once a week. I'm not very good about an upload schedule. I make educational videos about history, politics, and current world events, and sometimes just random videos. I'm very inconsistent, but you know that's why you love me. So without further ado, let's get on to the video. So if you are Gen Z like me, there will be many international conflicts that have defined your upbringing. One of them being the war on terror and 9/11. That is like the easiest way to date. If someone says, oh, between the towers fell, war on terror, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, you will know exactly what it is, because that's what we've been dealing with our whole lives. But it didn't start with us. It actually has a long history, and we're just now seeing the culmination of that history. So before anyone puts blame on Biden or Trump or even Obama, who started the withdrawing troops process, let's take it back all the way to Richard Nixon in 1978, where our conflict begins. In 1978-1979, the soy revolution of Afghanistan put the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan in charge. That was a communist, Leninist, Marxist type party. And it was the first one of its kind, the first one to really call it a democracy. And it's also known as the Soviet-Afghan War, because the Soviet Union supported that overthrow and supported that ruling government. And the US and many other allied countries like the United Kingdom and France did not like that, so we funded the Afghan Mujahideen, which was a rebel group trying to overthrow the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan. And so this civil war that ensued lasted between 1979 and 1989 until the Soviet Union withdrew their army and conceded the loss. However, this civil war started a series of civil wars that are still going on to this day. And even though the Soviet Union left, the war continued because these factions were still fighting, even though the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, it's a long name, that's why they abbreviate it, even though they no longer had that manpower, they were still in charge. And so the next war, which went from 1989 to 1992, continued with just the Afghan Mujahideen and the Afghan army, which was the ruling government army. And so that continued until the capital city of Kabul fell to the Mujahideen, which remember was backed by the United States. It fell in 1992. But wait, there was more. Between 1992 and 1996, now this is around Bill Clinton's time, and from starting 1979 to 1989, we went through Richard Nixon and Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan. So now we're in around Bill Clinton era and George Bush the first. Infighting began between the Mujahideen. So now you had the Mujahideen and you had more Mujahideen, and they're just fighting each other now on areas they should control and who should be in charge and what kind of policies do they want to enact. So basically, the rebels are now fighting within themselves, and that starts another civil war. And half of that, one of the factions, is what becomes the Taliban, and that faction was backed by Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Al-Qaeda. They're the ones who funded the growth of the Taliban, and they're the ones who trained them and armed them. And eventually the Taliban took Kabul in 1996, and they ruled over Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001 until, you guess what happened? The war on terror began. Al-Qaeda or whoever bombed the Twin Towers, and the United States said, you know what? No, we are going to go and eliminate everybody we think is responsible. And so that leads us into the present war on terror that we are seeing now and that we have grown up with. War on terror started in 2001, and it's technically still going. But it started in Afghanistan, and it's technically still going, and we don't know what is going to happen now that the Taliban is in charge again. We don't know what the Americans are going to do. We don't know what anybody else is going to do. But how did we get here? So George Bush decided that we're going to basically find everybody responsible for 9/11, and we are going to kill them. And so that leads us to going to the Taliban and saying, hey, we would like to overthrow you because you were harboring Al-Qaeda militants. You have Osama bin Laden as your guest, and letting him basically run Al-Qaeda from Afghanistan. Could you please not? Can you turn him over to us? And the Taliban said no. So we invaded and we removed them from power. Now this didn't end Al-Qaeda, this didn't end the Taliban either. But now Afghanistan is without the Taliban, which many found to be very good because they are horrible to women and are one of those very extremist Islamic groups that, while the religion itself isn't very oppressive, the way it is enforced and the way it is interpreted is. So a lot of people were very happy that the Taliban was gone. A lot of people were like, hey, we don't want the US here either. But anyway, the US and the UN helped create a new democratic government in Afghanistan, and we kind of just kept all of our military there because we were still fighting the Taliban, which was largely based in Afghanistan, as it originated in Afghanistan despite being backed in Pakistan and all those other countries that I named earlier. First democratic election in Afghanistan was held in 2004, and I don't mean like the first ever. Like, they had democratic leaders before, despite all of the overthrowing and the revolutions and civil war and militants. But the first modern democratic, I'm so sorry for the sound outside. I can't do anything about it. They're taking out the trash, I believe. Anyway, the first modern democratic election was in 2001, 2004 kind of, and the first president elected was Hamid Karzai. I don't think I'm pronouncing it right, but I believe that's his name, and he went from 2001, 2004, because it's iffy when he really started, but basically let's just say 2004 to 2014. So that's 2 terms that he had, and he started out very popular, ended not so popular. He was popular internationally. He had a pretty good standing with most of the world. His biggest, I guess, non-supporters, he had a lot of disagreements with the United States despite having a strong relationship with us, because he felt that the reason Afghanistan was still suffering was because even though they were here and they were helping us in a military fashion and not in a infrastructure and rebuilding fashion. And so while countries like Iran or Pakistan or other surrounding Middle Eastern countries were helping them rebuild, the US was just having their troops there and fighting the Taliban, which more or less led to more casualties for Afghanistan civilians instead of actual military casualties. And so he was like, well, we appreciate you being here, but could you please help us rebuild our country instead of having battles that hurt our civilians? You know, you are threatening our children, you are a threat to the safety to our country because you are fighting this war here, when really, if you really wanted to help us, you could be helping us rebuild. But he was elected to a second term. That was mostly because a lot of people were afraid to go out and vote, because once again, it's a very dangerous place to live when there is foreign and non-foreign hostile troops around. And so it was very low voter turnout, which led to a runoff because people didn't actually know if he was democratically voted or if there was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of tell of, you know, possible corruption during his presidency, but ultimately nothing was really found. Now, on to Ashraf Ghani, who was the current president of Afghanistan from 2014 to 2021 until he fled the country yesterday. He was elected I feel like we possibly had something to do with it, we being the United States, as in there was no clear winner, but then the United States had to go down there and be like, so can we have this agreement that he won? You know, if we have an agreement that he won, then we'll still give these other people positions of power within the government. And they just said, sure, I guess. You know, what are we gonna do? But his main thing was peace talks with Pakistan and peace talks with the Taliban, which are pretty questionable. Like, I commend him for wanting to extend that olive branch, but at the same time, it's like, it's a very questionable means of doing it. I think he made a few announcements saying that he would definitely grant people of the Taliban citizenships because they're Afghans, and he's president of all Afghans, not just, you know, the ones that voted for him. And he encouraged the Taliban to become an official recognized political party so that they can participate in democratic elections if they want to control the government so bad, that he would grant them citizenship and passports. And he wanted to improve talks with Pakistan because that's where the Taliban is mainly, you know, being funded, being hosted, even though not anymore. Pakistan says they're not doing that anymore, but, you know, that's where they originated from. And so he thought if he could be close with Pakistan, he could be close with the Taliban, and eventually the Taliban and he would come to an agreement and the war would be over. But obviously that didn't happen because now the Taliban has taken over once again. And yes, he does completely blame the US withdrawal for why the Taliban is happening. And us withdrawing and us being there in general is completely why the Taliban is in power right now. But it's not because we really left that it is, though that is part of it. They were slowly taking over, but they took over as quickly as they did because, like the first president said, we were funding a war, we weren't funding any permanent solutions. We weren't rebuilding the country, we weren't helping them get back on their feet per se. Even though they were a poor country before the Soviet Union intervened, but they were also a peaceful country before the Soviet Union intervened. You know, we kind of brought and created this war to them. We created these conflicts, we created this terror, kind of. And instead of helping them, you know, to become peaceful and to build back up any wealth, to create any long-standing institutions or create any way that they could continue to improve themselves, we just funded our own military and we funded a war, and that's not what they needed. And so that is why, as soon as we left, everything fell apart so quickly, because without us, we left them with basically nothing. No way of defense, no strong government, and that is on us. And I will, as someone who supported US troop withdrawal from Afghanistan and from every country that we are in currently, I would like to say that we made a mistake. I don't think it was a mistake to leave. I think it was a mistake for us to solidly back a solution that we didn't know all the information about. We were ignorant to think that such a simple solution would be effective. We were ignorant to assume that withdrawing would have no long-term effects. And I'm sorry. And I know that means nothing. We can't fix it. We can't change it. Us going back isn't going to change anything or fix anything. But I think we have to recognize our part in this and where we to talk about our reactions. What do we think is going to happen? What has U.S. citizen reactions been? And it's not completely clear the full census of what our opinion is on what happened, because usually when I make these kinds of videos, I've waited a few weeks to a month to talk about it, but this happened literally yesterday, and I thought I should talk about it now because it has been such a long-standing issue and that defined my generation, and it's important to know what our reactions to it are, and it's important to talk about it now because it is such a big, well-known issue. And so far what I have seen most is veteran reactions to it. A lot of veterans, especially younger veterans, served in Afghanistan, as that is the main war we were involved in, is a war on terror, and that included Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq. And it's a lot of them, who have endured war, who have come back with PTSD, with amputated limbs, with brain damage, who are not receiving, many of the benefits from the government, who are now, that cost them their lives, basically. They have, they're no longer treated as equal citizens, treated as second-class citizens because we treat our disabled so poorly. And now they're wondering, what was it all for? We went there, we fought, we gave up not our lives, but our livelihoods, for this. And what was it all for? We failed. It's very reminiscent, and I've seen this compared a lot to Vietnam and our evacuation of Saigon. Because once again, it was a long fought battle that left some of the deepest scars in our veterans and the people who didn't make it. And then to see us withdraw, it's kind of like seeing us give up, saying it wasn't worth it. Your sacrifice was for nothing. And it wasn't for nothing. But that is the big thing, is that everybody who endured that is wondering, why did I have to, if we were just gonna leave? And that is heartbreaking, to see something that you've worked for and sacrificed a good portion of your life for culminate to nothing. And it feels like a personal attack, because it just feels like one more fuck you from the US government. But the truth is, we shouldn't have been there in the first place. Our actions in the Cold War, our actions in the Civil War is what led to this today. And our inaction in rebuilding the country, our desire to see vengeance on Al-Qaeda and vengeance on the Taliban instead of helping what could have been incredible allies in the Middle East, which is something we want so desperately. We have Israel because we want an ally, we want an in because we have stakes in the Middle East, even though it's only oil. Having that ally and actually genuinely helping them would have been better than a 20+ year war that left everybody hurt, that hurt the citizens in the countries that we were fighting in, that hurt our citizens who, through our military system, were forced into this situation, and now look on it and saying, what was it all for? What was the point of my life? I had no choice to go in here, and you put me through hell, and for what? And that's heartbreaking. And once again, I'm sorry. And I know that means nothing, but I have to admit the part that I played in this. I voted for Biden, and I back this. And while I'm just one person, it is hopeless. It feels hopeless to watch, he was our one chance to beat Trump. Trump was the great big evil. And now it's like a big slap in the face to see all of the heartbreak and damage done by the good guys. It feels hopeless because now it's really setting in that there's no way to win. It feels like there's no way to win here in America. When the good guys can commit arguably more atrocities than the bad guys. It sucks. Because no matter what we do, people are going to get hurt in our name. Our government doesn't care about that. We're not taking in refugees. We exiled 8,070 secretly, illegally from the country this past month. And that wasn't a Trump thing. That was a Biden thing. It's an American thing. It's not one party or the other. It's not a Republican versus a Democrat. It's America does these atrocious things. No matter what party, no matter whether you're conservative, liberal, right-wing, left-wing, we do these things. And we have to hold ourselves accountable for that and commit to changing how we run things. And it feels hopeless because I don't know if we ever will. And I don't like thinking about how millions of people have died and will continue to die because of my country and because of me indirectly. Because whether I like to admit it or not, I am a participant in this system. And that sucks.